But Srimathi, on that point, and I know that this is something that you've experienced, walking into a room full of men in a sari, where you've always been asked, at least at the start of your career, where's your manager? Are you still asked that question?
Yeah, at least not now. I think the age shows, so they don't ask for the manager. And the manager has to be male, right, most of the time. I think that kind of conscious or unconscious bias is slowly going away, especially in India. But what's most interesting is there are certain still perceptions running as to who has to do what kind of job roles. I think unconscious bias or conscious bias, the change has to happen in our homes first. If the dads, the fathers at home can actually help us to transform that and start doing things which otherwise are constituted to be the mother's job at home. I think there's a lot of bias that will change. I
wish Indra was actually here in person, because I had the opportunity to speak with her when she launched her book, and there's a very interesting anecdote that she shared, that the day that she was actually appointed as the CEO of PepsiCo, she went back home and her mother was there, and she said, oh, you know, I've just been appointed the CEO of PepsiCo. And her mother said, well, all of that is fine, but you know, there's no milk in the fridge, so can you please go out there and get it? So I think the point that you're making is absolutely right. The disproportionate burden of care, child care, geriatric care, all of that, and of course just running the household continues to be on the women, and I think we need to make that that shift. But Noopur, you know, one of the big issues that we are seeing today is that even though we've increased the pipeline of women being educated and coming to the workforce, CNBC-TV18 and FICCI did this first survey, and we surveyed over 80 companies in the manufacturing and the services space, and what we found was that the attrition rate of women in the 20 to 30-year-old category was the highest at over 15%. So that leaky pipe continues to leak. Now, what do you do to try and stem the leak, Noopur?
I think some of the points are already made, that if you are able to instill that ambition and drive in young girls to actually embrace and be financially independent, that is a good starting point, right? But that would not be enough, because like Srimathi rightly pointed out, the fathers also need to ensure that there's no discrimination at house, whether he and
not just the fathers, the mothers also need to ensure that there is no discrimination. It's very often the mothers who will say that, okay, the boys don't need to do anything, but the girls do.
So Shireen, let me just probably talk about my own house. I come from a place where my mother has been my hero and my supermodel, and she was an IS Allied Services officer, retired now. She ensured that there was equal focus on education between me and my brother, and the life skills were equally taught to both of us, be it driving, be it swimming, be it cooking, right? When you come from that kind of a household, that is a privilege in itself.
Yes.
But what also happens on account of that is that for me, being financially independent is an imperative. And I grew up with dreams saying I can be whatever I want to be, right? So if that is taken care of, now I will say something slightly controversial, but I love talking about it. I feel that one of the most important career choices that a woman makes is who she marries, right? If you get a partner who's equally invested in your growth, your vision, your dreams, then I think half of the battle is won. And from there on, the equal responsibility, the sharing of workload is taken care of, because the period that we're talking about, women leaving the workforce, age between 20 to 30, is exactly the years where they get married, life happens, they have children, and at that point of time, it becomes very, very difficult to come back unless you have a support system in place. And which is why, as an organization, it is also our responsibility to ensure there's a creche around that you can possibly pay for. Maybe you can support a nanny care. That is something that we are indeed doing. So if an organization is able to support the woman during a lot of these life stages, I think there's no reason why they would want to stay back and drop off.
Take us through the examples from Israel on what has worked, because sometimes some of these policies can also have a counter impact.
You're absolutely right. I agree with you. It needs to start in the home, right? The woman needs, or the young girl, woman needs to grow up with the ambition and the knowledge she can do it. It definitely needs, the workplaces themselves need to be able to give her the support system she needs. Sometimes it's a little difficult without a government policy because the company doesn't want to at times spend money, and it does cost money to offer a creche or give incentives for women to take a nanny and then come back to work. So we do see the moves, but the government has to be there in order to mandate things. In Israel, we still don't have 6 months of maternity leave. We have 3 months paid, and then she can take another 3 months, he or she, sorry, it's now for both mother and father. One of them can take an additional 3 months, but without pay. But obviously, and we see other countries, we see the States, we see other countries, when it's not mandated by the governments, companies or businesses that aim to make money aren't going to give it freely of their own volition.
Most of the time we talk about bridging the divide only at the entry level. No, I think we need to have a lot of focus on reskilling and getting women back in IT, because if you look at the attrition, and the highest attrition is among the women in the early 30s. And they go in with like 8 to 10 years of significant tech experience. So just skilling them a bit, because if you really have listened to Mr. Lakshmi Narayan's conversation a little earlier, every day the technology is changing.
Yeah.
So the women need to reinvent more than men, especially when she takes a career break. So I think there must be a separate focus, a single-minded focus between the government and the corporates to have a skilling body only for women who want to get back to work. That way you will find 65% of the women living in the smaller towns will embrace technology and start contributing towards the economy.
But Srimathi, I want to get each one of you to address this issue, since we're talking about technology and we're talking about an acknowledged fact that there is a conscious and an unconscious bias that often works against women or against diversity, but more so women in the workforce. What is the role that technology can play to deal with that? Can artificial intelligence deal with this problem?
90% of the people, whoever goes for automation, prefers a female voice more than male voice. But many times the conversation is about whether this girl wants to be single or what is your preference and stuff like that, right? So, yes, technology is gender agnostic, but how people are using technology, I still find that there is going to be there are certain unconscious biases in a very big way. Take, for example, we are talking about IT, but we just forget about engineering industry, which is an integral part of the ICT. You will still find like 12 to 13% only are women, especially who could embrace digital engineering, who could work in circuit branches, the VLSI, digital, going into the shop floors and doing design. I think we have a long way to go.
In your experience, what has been the hardest thing to navigate as you've moved up a leadership role?
So I think goes without saying, Shireen, that the hardest thing to navigate has indeed been the discrimination and the biases, right? Some of them have been unconscious, some of them have been conscious. So for example, when I was on my maternity way, I was passed up a promotion, right? But I did not let that come in the way of being where I want to. And I think which is the reason why I force my team members who are male colleagues whose wife is going into maternity to actually take leave. I force them into leave and say that we will take care of everything else. You ensure that you are doing your role. So the most difficult would be there have been men in the leadership positions for ages. They have to really embrace the change that women are bringing in, as long as they can do it. And technology will definitely play a role, because representation definitely matters in the AI algorithms, ML algorithms that are currently being created from all the content that has been written by men, right? So we have to ensure that we play our part, we make our voices heard. And in order to do that, the challenge will be men who are not willing to embrace what we bring to the table.
Well, Srimathi, Noopur, and Consul General, thank you so much for showing us your strength and for sharing your stories here with us at Imagine in Chennai.